Red Dreaded Nation, what is up? Comics Plus, Akasan here. How you doing? Your boy's back with another commentary video. I apologize for the fact that I haven't been able to be doing the call-in live streaming news of comic news on a weekly basis. We have a problem on YouTube where every time we stream, YouTube automatically kicks some of my subscribers off, and that obviously has been quite a problem and problematic for the growth of this channel. So we stopped doing it. Maybe I'll move it to Twitch or something in the near future, but we'll test some things out, and I'll see if my network can help us out. But everything, the internet, Zack Snyder has been blowing up the internet again with comic book news, and it's not all good. He's kind of getting a new asshole ripped right now by other comic creators for some comments that he said, and I'll probably do that in a separate video. But I do want to talk about his original plans for the Justice League, a three-parter type Justice League story that he essentially blurted out last weekend. He had a 3-day marathon type of situation where you could see his I believe it was Dawn of the Dead, Watchmen, and Batman v Superman. All of the director cuts were shown, and then he did some Q&A on a few different things. And early on with I believe it was Watchmen and Dawn of the Dead or something like that. Yeah, Watchmen and Dawn of the Dead, he kind of made little hints about the Snyder Cut and things like that. He didn't really allude too much into the Snyder Cut situation, stuff that we don't already know. There were things that were said about how there's 10 different cuts, but you know what? That's how editing works. That's how film works. And the fact that I know a lot of people were not happy with the Justice League version, but let me go ahead and tell you some of the stuff that he mentioned during the panel about the way he was going into fruition of what he was kind of going to basically do. This comes courtesy of Uber Kryptonian on Twitter. Make sure you go ahead and check him out on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. I've already dealt with this a lot, and I'll read you my replies to a lot of this stuff, but make sure you check him out because I actually like his stuff. He's definitely a huge Snyder fan, but I think he's also very fair in terms of how he handles things, and he's never cussed me out as far as I know. So anyways, what I wanted to say is here's what the original Justice League plan was. Darkseid defeats the League. Darkseid boom tubes into the Batcave and murders Lois. Superman succumbs to the anti-life equation. The surviving League members of Flash, Batman, and a broken cyborg try to time travel and alter the past. I know you're already gonna say it. Dun 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 dun. Sounds really familiar, okay? Following up, Uber Kryptonian writes in, this was all supposed to flesh out the nightmare sequence from BVS. This is the nightmare timeline, and it was the original script before WB forced the changes. And this also goes parallel into almost everything that Kevin Smith was saying in a video a while back about this three-parter type Justice League idea that Snyder has. And I did some research on this, and a lot of people have really kind of confirmed this is kind of where Justice League 2 was going to be happening and such with the anti-life equation. The conflicts of Lois. See, a lot of people are saying Batman was going to give up his life to save Lois, and that may be true. But now this definitely confirms that Darkseid was going to go in to the Batcave and fucking kill Lois Lane like Savitar or some shit like that, right? Because she's the key. Why? I don't know. But let me just go ahead and read you something else that we all kind of knew previously. Was part 1 of Justice League was going to be Steppenwolf arrives on Earth and is defeated by the Justice League. A boom tube opens and they meet Darkseid. They realize that there's a bigger threat out there. That's essentially, just like Kevin Smith said, essentially everything we got in the first cut of Justice League, with the one piece of Darkseid missing here. Part 2. The Justice League take the fight to Darkseid on Apocalypse. This has been kind of disputed. Some people say yes, no. Teaming up with the Green Lantern Corps to face him. Unfortunately, Darkseid defeats them and heads to Earth to turn it into the Nightmare World from BVS. And in Part 3, the final stand against Darkseid set on the Nightmare Earth. And I believe that has to do a lot with the alternative timelines, working with the Flash and all that other stuff, right? So here's my thought on this, as this was going to be the span of what? 4 or 5 different movies or so, and I talked about this because I don't necessarily think that this was a bad idea. I don't think this was a bad idea, but it sounds great on paper. That's essentially it at this point. But everything with, just like everything with the early beginnings of this DCEU, and the biggest fault of the DCEU in the beginning was direction. Direction and execution and reception. And I think that's the biggest problem is, like, make no doubt about it. I recognize that Snyder is a comic book fan. He has his particular vision about the way comics are, which I think is a little bad because of the fact that he's such a fan that it's hard for him to actually see the bigger picture. You know, like most fans, we're gonna have our particular way of what we want something to be, but not the particular way of the way it needs to be in order to be that billion-dollar franchise. And at the end of the day, folks, that's all it is for the WB. They want a billion-dollar franchise. They're not doing it for the fans. They might make you believe that sometimes, but I remember when BVS first came out, they're like, they weren't doing it for the critics, they were doing it for the fans. No, they were doing it for the money. They were doing it for the money, okay? Let's just put that out there. Nevertheless, the treatment sounds great on paper, but again, the execution would have failed miserably. And one of the reasons I believe that is because the reception of Man of Steel was already mixed. There was already a problem. We all know what happened with BVS. I guarantee, even if the Justice League version that we saw didn't happen, and we got the movie that Zack Snyder wanted to tell, I guarantee that shit would have been shut down by WB afterwards. We would have never had a Justice League 2 after that. The reception would have been so poor on a Snyder version of Justice League. Nobody would have wanted to continue this. I understand that there's a core fandom out there that would have eaten that shit up. But based upon what we've already seen through Man of Steel, particularly BVS, Justice League wouldn't have had that drive. A Snyder Cut version of Justice League. Now, hear me out for those that are already disliking. Justice League would have not had that particular drive and amp feel to want the general audience and the majority of the audience for a sequel. It just would have just been a downhill from here on out. You can definitely trust me on that. On paper, again, this sounds great, but knowing what we know about Zack Snyder and his kind of vision, his image, I definitely see the sort of, there's hope peeking through, but it's so dark and so has this melodic, miserable feeling throughout the entire issue. You don't really actually feel excited. And I'm talking about the majority of people. You don't have that drive to actually want to go back and see more of it. BVS is the perfect example. Zack Snyder got the idea of what he wanted to do. Everything he got to do everything he wanted to do for the most part. And I'm talking about, and even released the Ultimate Edition, right? But that still doesn't change the perception of it. You don't go in there thinking, yeah, fuck yeah, Batman, I love him now. He's a fucking murderer. Yeah, I want to be Batman. No. in the BVS, man, I sure want to be Superman. Oh wait, he's dead, right? And I think that's one of the biggest problems is when you look at what's going on with Aquaman now, with Shazam, you're seeing the proper way of how comic book movies should be marketed, and that particularly lines in with making sure adults can still enjoy it, but it's still for the kids. Again, this is going back. This is not going back. This is not a question of how a story should be told, but more or less how a story should be marketed if you want $1 billion franchise. And again, as I reiterate, that's called. Make no mistake, that's what the WB wants, is $1 billion franchise. They don't have Harry Potter as strong anymore. Nolan was out with the Batman series. They want that $1 billion franchise, and they're sitting on a gold mine of opportunities. And as you can see now, with the success of Aquaman, with the success of what Wonder Woman did, it didn't do $1 billion, but it still did impressive numbers. The reception Shazam is getting, Shazam of all movies is getting, that gold mine is finally starting to pay off. And unfortunately, Zack Snyder's vision is not that gold mine. It's not the bankable thing that WB was looking at. And the only other thing that I wanted to say after that is the fact that a lot of people were saying, well, they should have never kicked Zack Snyder off his own movie. They should have just let him finish this movie, finish this story. You have to think about it in an investor's point of view. How much money did they put into BVS, right? How much money did they put into Man of Steel? How much money did they put into BVS? And we saw the reception about that. It's all about, it's a numbers situation. It's an investment situation. They tried to salvage Justice League. Obviously that did not work out. But if they let Zack Snyder tell his story in Justice League, and it's still, at the end of it reminds me of the way sometimes I watch some of these TV shows, and you're kind of sitting through it, and you're like, please, let's just end this. And then it gets to that final season, the final episode, and you're like, wait, what? They're going to make another season? That's essentially the way I feel the Snyder Cut would have ended. Is like, oh my God, please do not and that's exactly how I felt after watching even the Frankenstein version of Justice League. When that movie ended and the credits went up, people were just like, thank you, let me just get this over with and let's go back to solo movies. So that's my situation on everything. And the other thing I was also going to mention is the fact that with Snyder's vision of things and the way he looks at particular things, it's pretty cumbersome. There's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of things going on in this treatment that the average Joe watching a movie is gonna be like, what the hell? It's not. It just doesn't work in that sort of aspect. I believe, as a creator, you gotta go in with that. Let's not start with Endgame, the Russo brothers, things like that. Marvel has had the benefit, has taken the time to build these movies over 10 years. And even if you don't, even if you haven't seen all of the movies, there's at least somebody out there that's gonna warn you, before you see Endgame, you're gonna need to watch a few of these movies to have a hint of what's going on, right? The way Snyder, I feel, was painting things was you essentially need to have something and this is one of the biggest problems with what a lot of people had was with Batman killing, and his Batman killing, being a killer, was you already need to sort of kind of have this connotation or this idea of why these characters would do something like this, or who these characters are, or something like that. And, for example, Darkseid killing Lois, why would he do that? I've never seen, obviously Darkseid and Thanos are very similar in the same sense. Why would Darkseid do something like that? I've never seen him, you know, I've seen him take random dudes out on the street with the Omega beams and things, but to like purposely go in there and kill Lois just to piss off Superman. So what's the history between him and Superman? We haven't really seen any of that, right? Does he know Superman's a Kryptonian? Does he know about Kryptonians, right? So even from a comic book perspective of people that know that, we start questioning that. So you can imagine the general people being like, what the fuck is going on here? And then secondly, the other thing I was going to mention about the anti-life situation is like, so we're like jump starting and fast forwarding through all this back history of all these characters, and Superman in particular. At this point, we've yet to actually get, well, at the end of Justice League, we kind of got that through Joss Whedon's version. The Superman we were trying to finally get, right? What I was going to say about that is the fact that, look, if Lois is dead, which sounds like Injustice already, it's like Injustice and Endgame put together. Injustice, if Lois is killed and Superman goes to the dark side and chooses the anti-life equation, then we're basically back to almost Man of Steel, BVS type things. Batman spent almost the entire time of BVS demonizing Superman and even in the movie, he looked kind of evil half the time. And we were kind of like played into our sort of believing that he was a credible threat, that we should kill him and shit. And so we never really got that hero of Superman that even if he went to the anti-life, he chose the anti-life equation and, you know, he became what? Evil Superman. How different was that from BVS and Man of Steel, right? Obviously, I know some hardcore fans are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm telling you from a perspective of looking on the outside, looking at all the promotional footage that we've seen of Superman. He's never been portrayed in like a very heroic light, and we finally did actually get that, ironically, in the recuts with Joss Whedon. So that's my thought on all that. Is like, you can't really just throw Superman in there for a second as being a true hero, coming already after the death of Superman, come back for a short moment, and then you're gonna make him evil Superman. It's a lot for people to fill in, and it's fairly convoluted, and I can obviously see why WB made the call that they did with after reception of Man of Steel a little bit. BVS, they just saw this sinking ship, you know, and they're trying to turn this thing around. So I see where everything kind of ended up. But what I will say is that I am still a fan of seeing this story being told out. Uber Kryptonian mentioned the fact that, you know, DC Comics should really get on the ball and publish this as a graphic novel. I would love to read something like this. Like I said, on paper it sounds great. With the right execution it sounds great. As a comic book, an Elseworld comic book, this sounds fucking great. I mean, it sounds like Injustice, but it's still similar, right? So damn, I wonder if Lois was pregnant in this version as well. Very possible. But I would love to see a comic book version of it. I would love to see an animated version of it. But I definitely see where WB made the right call in not continuing in this particular direction without any sort of filler type, any other stories to pattern things up so we can love the Justice League, not moody Justice League, love a Justice League of heroes before they're taken away from us. And as Snyder likes to say, the decharacterization or the dismantling of the common hero. And speaking of which, there's a lot more he's said on this, and the entire community has sort of ripped him a new asshole on this one. And the comic book creators, writers, fuck, dude, all alike. I will make another video on that shortly, okay? Take care of yourselves, guys. Red Dread Nation, stand up, speak up. Sorry, it's 1 o'clock in the morning right now. Stand up, speak up. Let me know what you guys think about all of this. I would love to know your opinions on this. Would you like to see, would like to have seen the original Snyder Cut, Justice League 2, and Justice League 3, we're talking about a span of like, what, 5, 8 years more of Snyder's vision? Or are you happy with the way it's gone and done, said and done, and now we have billion-dollar movies like Aquaman and the promising Shazam coming out very soon? Let me know what you think below. I'm out of here, guys. Make sure to subscribe for more comic book news and, of course, all this other stuff going on. And I'll talk to you next time. Peace, y'all. Release the Aka Cut.